Hello! Do you know, I've been FPVing now for over 10 years. I think I built my first model back in February of 2012, and I think I started flying it around May, so coming up to 11 years. So I thought what we'd do in this video is go back to some of my really original models, the oldest ones I have, to see how I constructed them and to see how they fly now. Because one thing I'm not very good at doing is throwing stuff away. I'm a bit of a hoarder, and I find stuff that I've spent a lot of time has real nostalgic value. So we're going to be taking a look at this tricopter. This is the first thing I built. I blame everything about me taking up this hobby on David Windersill, because he had really good instructions about how to build this thing. And it's gone through a couple of iterations. I actually started off with this little guy. This is the KK1, and it actually has screws for your gains. You actually use a screwdriver to adjust things, and there's no PID loop to mess around with, and there's no interface on a configurator. And this went through various different cameras and OSDs and VTXs, and this sort of progressed along with me. At the moment, under there, it's got a KK2, which is this guy, and had a screen, and the idea was you could set things with buttons rather than a screwdriver. Fancy that. And I haven't flown this in several years, and it's actually got one of the Immersion RC 600s, which don't work with the updated goggles. But I thought what we do, let's go to close-up and we'll have a look through this. But before we do that, I'll tell you what else we're going to look at, and that's my first proper mini quad. This is a ZMR 250. We didn't quite start out like that. My friend started trying to print quad frames. This is made out of ABS, so it's a bit flexible. Basically the blackout frame came out, but it was really expensive, so he tried building some. I used it for a while, and eventually the very cheap ZMR 250 frame came out. And this is a horrendous ball of wires. It's got Gemfan 50-30 props. Have a look at how flexible these things are. We're only on little 1804 2400 kV motors. It ran off 3S. If you went into a dive, you'd have to fully throttle up about 4 seconds before it got down, and you'll notice that camera angle is completely flat. So let's go to close up and have a look at both of these and see exactly what they've got in them. On this one, I've less of an idea. I think we got up to clean flight on this, but I'm not sure. I know it didn't have a flight controller with its own OSD, so we got an external OSD. But yeah, let's crack them both open and see what we're working with here before we decide what we're going to do and how we're going to try and fly them. One problem about trying to do a close-up on this one, it's absolutely humongous. We're using 11-inch props here, and the whole thing is very, very big. So might not be able to go through it all, but here's a couple of bits I noticed which are weird. As I said, I used to have various FPV cameras on this. I started flying this with a Gopro 2. You see I've got a live out cable that goes into a case, because I was really worried about damaging my GoPro, so I flew it in a case. I said, what about weight, who cares? I'm using a DAR2 Plus with individual servo cables there going into the KK2 there. One thing I am noticing about this is like all these sticky pads are starting to lift. This is like a 2-plate system, so I've tried to use earplugs here to try and isolate my battery and have that as the wobbly bit, and hopefully have this as like the clean bit. This thing here, which is from David's plans, is a bit of fiberglass that I whittled by hand to try and fit in there. This is just 10mm pine. We've got, these are Hobby King 18 amp ESCs, DT750 motors. These are on 11-inch props. I think I flew it mostly with 10-inch. And at the end here we've obviously got a servo. Hope that still works to move that around. Everything is cable tied. Even the legs are cable ties, and everything is just cable tied on. If we have a look at this arm, this is where the bulk of the electronics are, and I've had a lot of configs on this, and I'm trying to remember what I've got here. Obviously that is the Immersion RC 600mW 5.8 transmitter. As I said, this was one that doesn't work on modern goggles, so to fly this I'm going to actually have to bring out my original Fat Sharks, which has my old Immersion RC module in there that will work. I think this is a very basic Hobby King OSD. I had a full OSD thing here with GPS and stuff, and I think I swapped it out for this. This is just, I don't know, a maze of horrendous wires, including this one here, which I think might want to be connected into this one here, because that seems to be the output from the camera, and this seems to go vaguely into that bit. Yeah, this beeper's fallen off. That's a beeper that's on an individual channel. I've tried to protect my KK2. Oh, look at that. So I think we're going to need to stick a few things down before we try and fly this, but yeah, the basis is we try and fly this. This is on free sky, obviously, with that D8. Yeah, I'll patch this back together. We'll see what we can do. I've got no idea how to work the KK2 anymore, so I'm a bit screwed there. In the meantime, this is the little ZMR 250, and I remember doing this mod. So I drilled through here in order to put my antenna on. My antenna protected by a massive 3D printed thing there. This is fairly modern. This is not Smoldy or anything, but this is an Onway VTX, which was pretty good. Whatever I'm using here as my flight controller is on servo leads. I think I've got little 10 amp ESCs here. These are the absolute tiny motors. This is an RCX 1804. I don't think are they all RCXs? No, that one says ZMR, right, so that's different. I know I'm going to have some sort of power distribution board. I think that's a D4R running maybe on PWM or maybe PPM, don't know. And I've got some LEDs. That is the old CCD, I think 4020 sensor. I can see I've got a beeper in there. I don't know what else is in there. Let's take the top off. Let's see what is in that mass of horrendous cables and stuff and see what it's actually running. Holy crap. And I thought my wiring could be a bit messy now, but Jesus, nothing like this. At least I've improved a little bit here. So what what are we looking at here? Wowzers. Well, I can at least see under there is a power distribution board. So we've literally just taken the power in from all the ESCs, and I presume that's then going somewhere else. This is a D4R2, and you notice we've got this little jumper here, and that means put it in PPM mode. It also looks like we're running telemetry with something or other. This is a piece of glue. Okay, so I'm just going to have to lift this up, aren't I? There's a lot of glue around here, basically. I'm not sure why. But under here we've got, here it is. This is my OSD. This is the little MWOSD board. The MWOSD was a software. The board is, I can't remember, some little Arduino type thing. Let's see if I can take this off easily. Okay, so we have got an original Acro Flight Rev 5 board, which was the first things that started running base flight. I think I at least got up to clean flight, I hope. You'll notice I'm using PWM, full cables for some reason. I was against cabling in directly at that point, and these look awkward. Looks like power in. Ugh, this is horrendous. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to really try and do anything with this. I'm going to plug it in just to see if I'm running clean flight or base flight, but I'm not going to do anything else with it. I think I've still got the model on the Tyrannus, so I'm hoping I'll just be able to fly it and see what happens. I think I can fly this on regular goggles. This is going to be on F1 because that's how I used to fly. I don't know why I've got like a little right angled adapter in this little pigtail. I guess so I could do the thing with the but yeah, I'm just going to pretend I didn't see this horrendous mess, stuff it all back together and just try and fly it, and let's see what happens. Okay, so we got the tricopter repaired and it took a while, but after checking I think arming is, what was it again? Okay, arming is simply that, and disarming is that. So if we arm it, spin it up slightly, and I just wanted to make sure that the servo would move okay. So that bit's okay. Now the bit that's wrong, and doesn't seem to be working, is the VTX. We've got a sort of rolling pattern there, and if I go one channel up, kind of get a little bit of something there. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Is it the TV out problem? Is it the VTX problem? So that's something I need to dive in and have a look at there. Okay, this looks better, although that distortion you'd see there is normally with this old type of immersion RC transmitter with a new receiver. What it was is I somehow wired this up so my ground, I mean, the fact I've used a red wire here is just stupid, and my ground goes to white and my video goes to red, and now I've unplugged all this, so I have to cable tie that back together. Anyway, progress. I think yeah, we can try flying it somehow. Hello, welcome from the field. Well, we're here to check out whether this tricopter will fly along with the old quad, and it's not the conditions I was hoping for. I checked the weather forecast yesterday and it said gentle weather, little chance of rain. We're talking like up to about 7 mile an hour wind. It's now like 17 to 20. It's really very gusty, so I'm a little bit worried. It's blowing very strongly that way. I'm in the sort of small field here, the small and long one, because there's no cows in it, and if things do go wrong and it does go down, at least I can sort of recover easy and it's not quite as wet as the other fields. One thing I noticed, I checked back on my videos, and I flew this 5 years ago, and the yaw seemed quite unresponsive, and I think I've tuned that to the extent where I've sort of deadened it a bit. So I'm going to check it hovers first, because I haven't even checked that, and then I might do a little bit of messing around with the PID stuff on the KK2. I did a bit of Googling, tried to work out and remembered how to do that, so we'll give that a go. One of the things I forgot about is, if you look at the tricopter, it doesn't fit on the mat, and with tall grass it's going to be a bit tricky to launch. Hopefully I can find a place where the grass is a bit shorter and I can just get the props out of the grass. But let's give it a line of sight first and see how we're looking. Okay, I think we've got this. So is that arm? No, one way's arm. There we go, we've armed. We're hitting a bit of the gubbin. Whoa, it feels so spongy. I haven't done this for a while, and it's like you put a movement in and like a minute later something happens. I mean, it doesn't fly too bad, but it's a question of like how well the yaw works. I mean, it feels alright here. It's a question of how it's going to go when we're actually running it. I mean, let's give it a go. Let's see what happens when we FPV it, and if it sounds or feels bad, then that's disarmed. Yeah, that's disarmed. Then we'll do something else. What I thought I'd do, somewhat for my reference, and so you can see what I'm doing, is film my sticks, because I want to see how much input I'm putting in and seeing what effects it has. Also, I can try and give live commentary unless it gets taken out by the wind. Let's see. Well, after all that, I turn it on and I seem to have power not coming up to the VTX and the OSD. It was working. I checked it on the ground, maybe something happened on the way up here, so I guess we'll have to move on for today to this little quad. I have placed on here a Firefly Q6. I used to fly with a Mobius, and before that a little 808 camera. Those don't work anymore, but I found this and I thought I'll shove it on there. We'll see what happens. And I'm a little bit more confident about this one flying actually, so I'll still do stick cam and we'll see what happens, because I want to show you exactly how much stick you have to put in with this thing, because it's not very powerful. It's on 3S 1300 battery, so let's try it out. Now, just before we start, I have to let you know that stick cam was a bit of a disaster. I start off with the sticks in view, but I forget about it and they move, unfortunately, so I've left it in for the commentary, which I think is quite useful. Okay, the wind is howling, but let's try to see what happens. We're in Acro mode, all good. So arming is that, or is it? Yep. Well, that's a good start. We're going to need to pop this up a little bit more. Right, big push. There we go. Whoa, this is fighting the wind somewhat, but hey, it's flying. Looking forward to going the other direction, just so it's going to be a bit faster. But you can probably notice, I think my throttle's at least 50% here. See how it feels in the corners. I mean, there we're going, so there's me. There's been 100% throttle there, not much happened. Whoa. Ooh, big throttle, come on. Man, this wind is very strong. I wouldn't normally choose to fly in this, but it's kind of like, what can I do? So let's power up. Wowzers. I want to do a dive, but it's a bit frightening. So if we power down a bit, we're coming down, powering up. just to keep level on this thing takes a lot of throttle. I mean, the good thing about it is I always remember it being strangely pretty good in terms of flight times. It didn't do too bad at all because we're not trying to put too much through them. They haven't got much of a... Ooh, I'm just concentrating, trying to get under this tree. They haven't got much of a turn on them, so it's like 5x3 is practically nothing in terms of how much power you're putting in. Of course, we're having to spin the motors an awful lot to do anything, but it doesn't seem too bad. VTX is hanging up okay. This is an Onway. This is a bit more up to date, so that's not too bad. Shall we try a loop or something? What I can't do is hit the throttle right down because there's no air mode. I never put it on, so I was like faking an air mode by putting, you know, a little bit of throttle on a switch or something. So to do like rolls and stuff in the olden days for me, it would be a case of going up high, not taking the throttle off and doing something like that really, which is not very exciting now, but at the time it was like, oh my god, I just went upside down. Yeah, so surprisingly, I mean, this is a battery from 2015. We've been going about 3 minutes-ish on fairly high throttle, but I'm guessing we're not pulling many amps because there's just not enough, I forgot what they call the term now, twist, I say twist on the prop, because it's only like 5x3 instead of like 5x5 or something like that, and it's only a 2-blade instead of a 3-blade, of course, so that makes it all a bit easier and it's slightly more efficient. It is trickier to fly. This is an Acro mode, of course. I didn't used to fly self-level even back in them days. And you know, I think it's surprisingly, even in all this wind, it feels quite smooth. And I think that's because what I generally did is I went a little bit over the top on the tuning and I dulled everything down perhaps a bit too much. This is perhaps my most tuned quad. So when it started out, this was horrendous. And because I only had this quad at the time, I sort of worked on it until I felt it was better. And this is sort of the best I got really. So this is good old Clean Flight 190. Is there a gap here? Yeah, let's try it. Oh, there's a big puddle as well. That's scary. So yeah, it feels a little bit spongy. When I turn, it's like there's a little bit of bounce back, and it's sort of almost like it's trying to find its heading properly. But despite that, I actually think it's flying all right. And as long as you don't want to do, you know, big aerobatics, you're okay. Let's try something again. Let's go up, full throttle, 100%. Oh my god, this is so slow. And let's dive down, taking the throttle off, and bring it back up 100%. And we just about made it. Holy moly.
2 minutes.
But yeah, this it's a shame it's this windy, because it does make things a little bit difficult. What you can't do is just pop up. I mean, it doesn't necessarily not suit my style of flying now. I generally do cruise around a lot more instead of, you know, doing flippy flappy things and stuff like that. So it feels a little bit like if you're flying like a cine whoop, except it flies slightly better than a cine whoop, because it doesn't, you know, get really... I couldn't imagine flying a cine whoop in that sort of wind today. That would be horrendous. But for this sort of thing, you know, just sort of going along, meandering around, sort of exploring a bit, I think it's actually doing pretty good. I am shocked it flies this well, actually. You can see the kind of yaw there, fighting a little bit. Not doing so well. And I think what we've got here, we've got ESCs are on. They are the original BL Heli, which you then had to flash by, you know, finding an FTDI adapter and finding pins on them and stuff. But running PWM, I think this was pre-one-shot stuff, and certainly pre like D-shot and all that other thing. It just didn't exist.
30 seconds.
That's probably why I had to sort of over-tune it to dumb things down a bit, because trying to get it less reactive is tricky. Oh, look at that, it's beeping at me, telling me it's low volts. Well, I set my alarm quite conservatively there, so it's when it dips into 3.5, it looks like it's beeping.
9,
But look at that, I've got nearly a 7-minute flight. That's insane.
6, 5,
So let's bring it down,
3,
see what we got.
2, 1. Timer 1 elapsed.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's disarm.
On that first flight, I'd managed to not turn the HD camera on, so I decided to go up again and get some external angles. And of course, I managed to crash it again on takeoff. I don't know how I managed to do that, but unfortunately, what I did do, although I managed to take off the second time, is I forgot to wipe down the camera lens, which then got a bit wet, so we haven't got a perfect view here, but we do have a little bit. And here's the view from the little Q6 HD camera, which, to say it's got a great big blob of water on its lens, doesn't do a bad job, especially in this sort of wind, and especially given that this whole quad is a little bit wobbly. But I think it does a reasonable job. I would have been pretty happy with this back in the day. It's by no means perfect, but it's not too bad at all. And I just did a few batteries like this going around, and I noticed that if I did like a really fast or hard turn and sort of expected it to work like the quads I fly today, that was bad, and you got some sort of bad reactions from it. But if you just, as I said, flew quite gently and sedately, which is really what this sort of thing does, then it's okay. And as far as going up and sort of doing aerobatics, it's like, you know, it'll kind of do them, but it's not very exciting and a bit boring. And a few external passes here, you can see that it's hardly flying along, is it? But, you know, quite a success, I thought, for an old quad like this. Not too bad at all. And once I got home out of the wind, it was really a case of I was checking through this, and I just noticed one of these JST connectors was just a little bit out more than the other ones. Just shoving it back in, managed to do that. Far too many connectors here. I mean, there's another one there, there's one there. It's a bad state of affairs that I wouldn't do nowadays, but that was the reason. But that seems to be working all right now. Well, it's a week later. We had to wait all this time for the weather, and it's a little bit less windy than last time, which is good. The sun is out, the temperature's dropped about 9 degrees, and with the wind chill, it's a lot colder. My hands I'm a bit worried about, but we fixed the problems with the tricopter. Let's try it again. Let's try stick cam again and see how we go. Okay, got to try and learn to keep my hands where they are. And that's not arm. Try that one. Yeah, okay, we're spinning something. Oh, we're flying. Jesus. So the first thing to say is these goggles don't have their own DVR
don't have their own fan, and don't have the sort of nice foam way of looking at stuff. They've got the, yeah, it's a bit sort of sludgy, the turn. It's not tight. They have their own sort of way of, well, the eye cups, they steam up, and if they sort of get steaming, you have to sort of lift them off your face for a while. But hey, we're flying. I'd say the tail feels a little bit loose. But so this is live picture through the GoPro 2, and I've enabled the GoPro's own OSD, which is the thing you can see along the top there, because I was worried that I haven't used the batteries for so long. I was a little bit scared that they'd fail. So let's see if we can do a turn here. Yeah, I'm having to put way too much into that turn. Oh, it just sprung back there. I think I'm going to have a look at that. So the OSD down the bottom is the cheapo 12 quid Hobby King OSD, which is just displaying voltage and time, and the stuff up the top is GoPro. And yeah, this is, although the GoPro is a nice camera actually, even for flying with, sort of through the lens, as soon as you go into the light, it gets very dark. And we've got especially low sun at the moment, so you can see it's not great flying this direction, but when I turn around, it's going to look really nice. So let's fly up here a bit. It's swinging around all over the place. So when I put my rudder input in, let's do a turn here, there's a hell of a delay. Whoa, hell of a delay, which I don't like. More input. Yeah, this side, look at the difference. What a lovely picture. You can actually see where I'm going here, but as soon as we turn around and come back the other way, it's going to look awful. So, should we try and do a little bit, get a little bit of speed going? Whoa, I do not like the way the tail is sort of ticking back and forth like that. It's not very nice. I'm hoping you can at least see my sticks this time. I've put myself right in the middle of that tree there. Very bad picture. Whoop, whoop. I'm not moving. Stop wobbling around. So one thing I can't remember, is this all rose-coloured spectacles? Do I remember this flying well and it always flew this badly and I just got used to it? I tend to think it flew better and I didn't have to fight it quite so much, because I'm doing a lot of, like, hey, where are you going? A tricopter? Why are you going over that way? Where it shouldn't be doing it. It was always quite flyable, but now not so good. But let's go over here behind ourselves. Let's go up a bit higher. Whoa, easy there, easy. This is really difficult. It does not like the wind. It's a big old bird with 11-inch props, and it's not enjoying the wobbles. I'm not enjoying the wobbles much either, if I'm honest. Oh, come on, come around. Oh. Right, my battery is getting a little bit low. I think I'm going to bring it in, make some adjustments on the KK2, see if I can get it flying a little bit better, and take these horrible eye cups off my head. When I first started flying this line of sight with 2200 milliamp hour 3S's, without anything on the tricopter, it flew for 13 minutes at a time. Some of that was to do with the fact I'm really just sort of hovering it and learning how to fly, but it was really light and it had big props that span quite slowly, so that was quite useful for that. It feels okay when it's kind of sheltered and like with low speed. You can still see that tail wobbling. That is a real tail problem. I'm brave enough to try and take it under stuff. Let's have a look what we got. Let's take it over this fence. Ooh, this makes me nervous. I love the shadow. It's been a long time since I've seen that big boy. Come on. I mean, this used to be all I used to fly. This was my first model. I had it for a long time before I got anything else, and I had various different configurations of it, you know, different flight controllers, albeit only two, different OSDs, different FPV cameras. I'm sure I had it on a nice PZO for a 2.0 at one point, which was really good, and I had the GoPro 2 with it, and I'm not sure why I shifted just to flying the GoPro 2, but there you go. Anyway, let's bring it in. Let's see if we can make some adjustments, make it fly a bit better, because my goodness, this is kind of hard work. I mean, it's okay if it's slow, but I feel it wouldn't take much to have it going out of control in the wrong situation. Come on down.
For the second flight, something seemed to go wrong. First, I didn't have power to the VTX, and when I fixed that, the OSD displayed off the screen, and we've got this thing saying setting display mode appeared. There are some little buttons there which maybe I managed to poke about with, and that seemed to cause a problem, but I flew it anyway. I figured I'd figure out what the voltage was. And obviously, whilst I'm flying with the GoPro 2, I'm also recording now. Now, the GoPro 2, of course, is quite an early GoPro. It records in 720p at 60. It did do 1080, but it would only do that at 30, so I always use 720p. And it was a pretty good image. Of course, it doesn't have anything like hyper smooth of the cameras now, and it doesn't do anything too special to try and do anti-shakes. But it was okay. And as before, this seems all right in a sort of straight line. You can still detect the sort of this tick-tock of this wobble, and I can't really blame it all on my memory failing. I think this is about the different sorts of props I used to use. I used to use a very flexible 10-inch prop, and I think I switched to 11 to try and give me more flight times and get it a little bit better. But obviously I tuned the whole thing around these 10-inch props, and it was definitely tighter than it was, because I remember it feeling really nice in turns, and now it feels terrible. I think there was always a little bit of a wobble with the tail, but not quite to this extent. But anyway, it flew, and the intention was to do a few more setups to get some external shots, but the tricopter decided it knew better. So I set myself up so I could film the takeoff and do some fly pass, and this is what happened. So when I saw in the goggles I had a face full of grass, I thought, oh, something's gone there, let's throttle back and go up again. But obviously that prop striking the ground was just enough to loosen off those cable ties, so the next time we powered up, the motor just fell off. And that was that.
I mean, when you're just about to take off and the motor just sort of decides it's had enough and comes off the frame, perhaps this should tell you it's time to stop. It's easy enough to put on, but yeah, it still flies like a bag of old bricks, so I think that's me done for the 10-year-old tricopter flying.
So there you go, that's me flying some old stuff, and perhaps the biggest, most uncomfortable part of that is not the fact that the tricopter was wobbling everywhere. It was using my old original Dominators. These eye cups, although you think, wow, that's really good for blocking out the light, A, it would steam up because it didn't have any sort of fan, and B, it's kind of like having your eyes gouged out. It's like really like zunk on there, and it's like, just feels like a form of torture. And obviously there's no DVR there, so I had to sort of stuff my DVR in the side there and hope for the best. I could have, because this is running a slightly more updated thing than I started with. It's labelled Fat Shark, and this is labelled the Next Wave. The previous model to that just wasn't as sensitive, so just that little upgrade got you about twice the range, but that just worked on the fat sharp band or the F band, and you could go through that with your buttons. Now, I have to admit, not everything was quite as old as everything else. This guy certainly was. Very much lots of original parts from 2012, but it did go through a lot of iterations. Different camera before I went the KK2, different receiver. I started on FlySky before I went FreeSky. Of course, went the KK1 is now the KK2, and that we had that full GPS for everything else. But everything else was the same, apart from the fact I probably used those smaller props and stuff. I can't quite claim pure legitimacy on this guy. This guy, the first time I flew to ZMR, I tracked it back, and if you want to take a look through the videos there, they're all there on my channel. And if you look at March 2015 is when you first find the ZMR. So the mini quad thing was kind of a progression. It actually started, and I would have of course flown this if I still had it, but I smashed it into 1,000 pieces. It actually started with this mini quadcopter kit that Hobby King sold at the time, and it was made of fiberglass, and it was pretty horrendous, and it would smash into lots of pieces if you looked at it too hard. But I put proper FPV stuff on that, and that was actually the first quad I did a roll on, and it's literally the slowest thing you will ever see. It's like, come on, we can do it all the time. We've got dropping out of the sky. From there, after I smashed it up for the umpteenth time, I'm like, I'm just going to build this out of wood, and I built a wooden quad with the same motors. And at the same time, that's when my friend Neil first made the K quad, and at the time we were flying out on these tiny little 1811 motors on 2S before the ZMR finally came along, and we went up to the massive heights of 3S. So it's not quite as old, but I just didn't have the other stuff, unfortunately. However, what I thought I might do, because I looked at the wiring on these models, I thought that is terrible. I keep thinking to myself now that I'm not very tidy, but man, I've improved a lot. I thought, could I take really old equipment, make a new build, and be able to fly it better? So what I intend to do is take the original KK board. Let's try this on a quad, and we'll use really old parts for a quad. And I went into my cupboard and I found these legs, because whenever you're looking at really old quads using PWM, you're really looking at a larger quad, because smaller quads are going to be a bit wobbly. Larger quads could be better. So far I've only found 3 of the motors. These are 2212 1000 kVs. Hopefully I can find the 4th one. And look, I found this. This is the original all-in-one ESC. This is 25 amp all-in-one ESC. They were a bit bigger back in the day, weren't they? And that will run it. And I'd like to kind of try and build an old quad using all old parts. And see if I can fly it, because I thought that might be interesting. So that'll be next time, but for now I've had an interesting journey down memory lane. But let me just say, haven't things come on? I mean, all of us that have been in this hobby a while do remember things fondly from a nostalgic point of view, and it was kind of nice to be able to have to make all the effort, because to get something off the ground, I look back at my tricopter, and when I first started trying to fly, it was just awful. It was wobbly and all over the place, and you had to experiment and keep iterating and get slightly better and slightly better. This is how I came up with this YouTube channel. This YouTube channel started out me posting videos of me crashing, asking forums what they thought was wrong, and it eventually progressed into flying, and then like giving tips about, like, I've just bought this and this is how I installed it, because of course there's no manuals and stuff. But yeah, it's nice to think back at the olden days, but I don't necessarily miss the effort we made, although it's sometimes people are a little bit fussy now. If there's the slightest wobble in footage, it's like, this quad's crap. It's not. You just have to go back a few years to think how bad things were and how much effort you had to make compared to now. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll hopefully be back next time trying to build something out of this pile of old bits and bobs and see what I can do with it. Hope that's been a nice little trip down memory lane. If you've got anything you want to share with me, bung me in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that YouTube nonsense, and I will catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.